The Gauteng Department of Education has ordered the immediate suspension of food sales on school premises to protect learners. In a statement that was issued yesterday, this is what the Gauteng Department of Education had to say. The Gauteng Department of Education has instructed all schools to suspend the sale of food within and around school premises until further notice. This decision is informed by the recent and alarming increase in incidents of foodborne illnesses affecting learners across various schools in the province. The department is deeply concerned by how these incidents have led to both loss of life and illness amongst learners. In response, we're implementing immediate measures to safeguard the health and well-being of our learners. Schools and school governing bodies are instructed to closely monitor and regulate vendors, tuck shops, and other outlets that sell food to learners. Specifically, schools must ensure that number one, only food of nutritional value is sold within or near school premises. Number two, no expired or repackaged food items are sold to learners. Number three, any individual businesses selling food to learners comply with Regulation 638 of 22 June 2018, which governs the safety and acceptability of food. Number four, schools and school governing bodies, vendors, and traders must familiarize themselves with the provision above. Schools and school governing bodies are further reminded of prior guidelines issued by the Gauteng Department of Education to regulate food sales to learners. These are the following. All food vendors and traders must obtain a certificate of acceptability by contacting their local health department's environmental health division before selling any food to learners. Food premises or stalls must be inspected and approved before operating. School governing bodies are responsible for ensuring vendors' compliance with these regulations, which include verification that all food items are properly barcoded and sourced from reputable suppliers. The department calls on schools to enforce these guidelines rigorously. Instances of non-compliance must be reported immediately to both the district office and the Department of Health. To further protect learners, schools and school governing bodies are advised to issue a circular to parents encouraging them to prepare meals at home instead of providing lunch money until the relevant authorities issue updated guidelines for food vendors. Additionally, schools are encouraged to engage community organizations, education stakeholders, small business associations to foster collaborative efforts aimed at preventing further incidents of foodborne illness, said the Gauteng Education MEC, Mr. Matome Chilowane. So this is what has been announced. And if you read it carefully, you can see that there's really an effort to discourage the consumption of these chips which are repackaged, which is why they've said that only food of nutritional value must be sold within or near the premises, that no repackaged food must be sold. There are also concerns that have been raised about expired food items where you have these packets which maybe were supposed to be best before 2023, it's 2024, it's still on the shelf or being sold. So there's clearly an effort to discourage that. And there's also an effort to encourage that everybody who is selling food in and around schools is appropriately certified with their certificate of acceptability, with the food stall being inspected and approved, and having barcoded. So that barcoded food or barcoded items is also something that's trying to reintroduce the fact that all of the items being sold must have the appropriate barcodes. Apparently, fake barcodes have been printed before. You need to make sure that they all start with certain numbers. I'm not a barcode expert, but this also is ostensibly to disincentivize, discourage the sale of these chips in and around the schools, right? So I think these are good measures. overall, because what you want to do is to make sure that children are protected to the highest level at all times. You want to make sure that children in communities are eating food that is fit and proper for human consumption. You want to make sure that there are no contaminants in any food that is consumed by children, because children are, after all, any nation's greatest treasure. They really are. They are the future. They hold the hopes and aspirations of generations to come, and they are the joy of every parent. Parents sacrifice so much just to be able to see their children smile and run around happily. So any measure that is taken to reduce risks to children is a very, very important and significant measure. I want to dive a little bit deeper. I want to dissect this topic a little bit deeper. And we all know that there have been reports of children dying in the townships. And these reports have seemed to become a little bit more frequent. And this is a very serious topic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide links to the articles and papers that I'm going to read or reference in the description of this video. So if you go to the bottom, if you are watching on YouTube, you should be able to click more on the description to get more information, and you'll be able to find links there. I'm going to ask that before you comment on a question of fact, that you make sure that you've gone actually to check the sources provided, and that if you're challenging a question of fact, that you provide a link to your source in the comments. I welcome comments. I read the comments quite often. And while we agree or disagree, generally you guys are very respectful, very understanding, very intellectual. On this topic, we're going to have to even raise that standard to make sure that we have a high quality conversation, because this is something that is very serious. It's a very serious conversation. I don't want to understate that. Right. So let's talk about the factual matrix as it pertains to this particular story. 6 children died in Naledi, Soweto, early in October. 5 died on the same day, and 1 passed away the following week. They died after reportedly eating these chips that they got from a Spaza shop, which was owned by a migrant. On or about the 26th of October, 4 men were arrested at a mall for the sale of Aldi Carb. Aldi Carb, which is also known by the trade name Temic, is a toxic pesticide used to control insects, mites, and nematodes in agricultural crops. These men who were arrested, the 4 men, were arrested with 1.456 kilograms of Aldi Carb. They were released on a warning, and they paid a 2,000 Rand admission of guilt fine each. The Minister of Health, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, gave a press briefing along with the Minister of Small Business Development, Stella Ndebele-Abrahams, and the Minister of Police, Senzo Mchunu, on the 29th of October about the arrests, about the death of the 6 children. And it's important for us to listen to what the Minister of Health said so that we can really unpack this issue. Right? It was an hour-long press conference. They took questions, but the heart of everything that he discussed is in the clip I'm about to play you now.
Terbufos, Terbufos. All the 6 children died of Terbufos ingestion. In the past weeks, several chemicals were bandied around as possible causes of death. Some were even found in some retailers. In order to avoid confusion, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to mention each one of these chemicals and explain their significance. But before I do that, I need to explain that apart from organophosphate, another group of chemicals used as pesticides are called carbamates. There's a slight difference between carbamates and organophosphate. As I said, they are both used as pesticides. But one major difference is that organophosphate is much more lethal and can cause irreversible damage. Sometimes last week, there was a statement that indicated carbamates as the cause of death. This was from post-mortem observations, just observations. But toxicology has proven that the actual cause of death is organophosphate and not carbamate, as it might have been initially thought. On Friday, the 25th of October, 2024, we had informed you that 4 people were arrested at the Johannesburg Mall because they were found trading in a chemical called Aldicap. 1,450 grams of this chemical was confiscated by police. Now, what led to the arrest of these 4 people was that during the operations in Naledi, some of the Spaza shop owners confessed that these 4 are the people, these people in the mall, in the Johannesburg Mall, are the people who are selling them illegal chemicals. That's why part of the team went there, and in fact, they found this Aldicap. Aldicap falls in the class of, it's one of the carbamates. I've mentioned that we have got organophosphate and carbamates, and organophosphate were responsible for the death, but Aldicap was found being sold. It is a carbamate, as we have already stated. It is not the cause of death in these particular cases. If it has caused death before, we are not yet aware of that, but it wasn't. But still, it remains illegal to be sold to the public because it is also a dangerous substance. At the present moment, samples that were taken via swabs in the various Spaza shops in Soweto have been sent to the National Health Laboratory Services, and we are still waiting for the results. This means that while organophosphate was found in the bodies of these children, we are still waiting to see if the organophosphate was also found in the Spaza shops so that we can scientifically link the events. It is also important to mention that police did find a packet of chips in the pocket of one of the children who demised. This was also sent for analysis, and the results were out, and they were found to be negative. That means this substance, organophosphate, which killed the children, was not able to be detected on the packet of chips that was found in the pockets of one of the children. Now, let's try to analyze the present situation that we are faced with. When we mentioned that we are sending teams to search for signs of chemicals in these Spaza shops, some people on social media were very skeptical because they reasoned, and I think as ordinary people it's understandable, they reasoned that if indeed there are chemicals in the Spaza shops that affected and even killed some of these children, why would Spaza shop owners not equally be affected? Because they should also be exposed to the same substance. It is very important to explain this. It is known medically that children are more susceptible to pesticide toxicity and other environmental toxicants than adults. This is due to several factors which are mostly physiological. The first one is body mass. Children have a smaller body mass than adults, and therefore, a given dose of pesticides can have more severe impact on a child because of the smaller body size. Number 2, developing organs. Children's organs are still developing, making them more vulnerable to the effects of pesticides because they are not able to handle them. Excuse me. Number 3 is the route of exposure. Children are affected by acute pesticide poisoning and chronic effects of exposure through ingestion, inhalation, and dermal contact. You're also aware of behavioral patterns of children. I'm sorry, before even coming to the root. The behavioral pattern of children is different from adults. We all know we have got children. One of their well-known behaviors is hand to mouth and hand to object. Adults don't usually do that. Children do that quite often whenever they've touched things, and this exposes them more than adults. And as I said, the route of exposure can be ingestion, inhalation, or dermal contact. That organophosphate can even enter your body through contact with your skin, and hence can affect you even from contaminated clothing. In other words, this organophosphate doesn't have to be in your mouth or inhalation to affect you. It can even go directly through your skin if you are in contact with it. So which means contaminated clothing can also affect people. But it has been reported by the World Health Organization that in children, the most commonest route is ingestion of this organophosphate.
To recap what the minister covered, the cause of the death of the children, according to the Minister of Health, was exposure to organophosphates. The initial suspicion from the autopsies was that the cause of death was from aldicarb, which is a carbamate, which is why when they went to the Spaza Shop's owners and they got them to tell them where they got the carbamate, which they found in the stores, those Spaza Shop owners took them to the 4 individuals who were selling the carbamates at a mall, and those individuals were arrested. The toxicology reports, however, indicated that the cause of death was not carbamate, it was organophosphates. Crucially, according to the Minister of Health, the organophosphates were not in the chips that were consumed by the children. Organophosphate is widely used as poison in the townships for pest control. It is referred to as halipirimi. Halipirimi, loosely translated, means you will not see sunset. And I don't know if I'm properly pronouncing it, whether it's coming from Sotho, Tswana, or from another language. Halipirimi. So if you can help me with the translation. The city of Johannesburg has also confirmed that 2 children who died in October of 2023, also in Naledi, Soweto, died from organophosphate. Now, talking about organophosphate in more detail, in a paper which was published last year in the BMC Public Health Journal, the paper had these following aims. The aim of the study was to profile pediatric deaths due to acute pesticide poisoning in the West Metropole of Cape Town, South Africa, to identify whether the active ingredients were highly hazardous pesticides according to the FAO and the World Health Organization. A retrospective and descriptive analysis of forensic postmortem records between 2010 and 2019 was conducted to identify cases of pediatric deaths, which means people under the age of 18 years old, in the West Metropole of Cape Town, involving pesticide poisoning admitted to the Salt River Mortuary, which is 1 out of 16 mortuaries in the Western Cape province. Demographic, circumstantial, autopsy, and toxicological information was captured. What was found is the following. In total, 54 pediatric deaths were identified, including 22 males and 32 females, out of 5,181 pediatric unnatural deaths admitted over the 10-year period. The median age of the people who passed on was 8.3 years, with the majority being under 5 years old, and also a second large group being between the ages of 15 to 18 years old. All incidents occurred in peri-urban areas of Cape Town, with most individuals admitted to hospital, close to 89%, for a median survival time, unfortunately, of 4.8 hours. Toxicological analysis was requested in 50 cases, representing 92.6%. With the organophosphate pesticides, turbifos, being identified in 29 of the 50 deaths, and another organophosphate named methamidofos occurring in 2 cases. So most of the deaths were as a result of turbifos, right? The adolescent deaths were unfortunately mostly related to self-harm. There were suicides, whereas the child deaths were accidental deaths. The BMC Public Health Journal is an open access, peer-reviewed journal that considers articles on the epidemiology of disease and the understanding of all aspects of public health. The journal has a special focus on the social determinants of health, the environmental, behavioral, and occupational correlations of health and disease, and the impact of health policies, practices, and interventions on the community. What the report basically indicated is that organophosphates are actually causing deaths of children in South Africa, and this study was done in the Western Cape, but I think its findings can be extrapolated to all of the other provinces, also considering what the minister said. Now, this issue of exposure to organophosphates is also affecting adults. A paper was published in the US. The paper was published in the US government National Center of Biotechnology Information National Library of Medicine. The title of the paper was Organophosphate Poisoning at the Chris Hani Baragwanath Academic Hospital between 2012 and 2015. What the paper looked at is that the median age, which was considered, was 30 years of age, with 68.2% being male. Admissions to the high care area constituted 52.7%, with the majority of patients requiring ventilator support. The median duration of stay was 6.8 days for the ICU and 3.7 days for the high care area. The overall mortality rate of all of the cases that were admitted was 5.4%. So 5.4% of the adults who were being admitted to the Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital actually passed away as a result of organophosphate poisoning. So these organophosphates are also killing adults in South Africa. Just so that you have full context, by the way, of the 84 Spaza shops in Naledi, 42 are owned by foreign nationals and 43 are owned by South Africans. So the composition and the ownership of the Spaza shops in Naledi is not just foreign owned, it's mixed. The Ekhuruleni area municipality also had children who died, and the initial suspicion was that they ate poisoned food from a Spaza shop as well. And the director of environmental health in Ekhuruleni, Dr. Jerry Chaga, or Chaga, I think it's Chaga, Dr. Jerry Chaga, said that the lab results from both Ekhuruleni cases confirmed the existence of organophosphate in the children's body, which he said was the most common chemical found in cases of poisoned food they've investigated. He however said tests have also shown that there was no link between what the children ate and what killed them, adding that the deceased might have got in contact with organophosphate via a contaminated source or surface. This is what Dr. Chaga said. In most instances, it is important to indicate that there is this organic phosphate that people would use called red poison, and others call it halipirimi. And in all of these instances, we find that people might have consumed this substance. As the result of testing, it would be proven that it is red poison and not food poison, he said. The director, Dr. Chaga, said, halipirimi is an illegal substance sold on the streets in most townships. In some instances, people would leave halipirimi in places where they hope it would be consumed by rats. The safety of this is questioned. We're embarking on a campaign to educate people about this, especially because it is an illegal substance. It is not regulated, even when people buy it on the streets. He went on to say, so we want to educate our communities in terms of this particular substance. Action needs to be taken. We need to identify where it comes from, the main seller, as people would be selling them in pockets in the townships illegally so. There still needs to be a huge production just to remove it. And this is according to Dr. Jerry Chaga, the Director of Environmental Health in Ekurhuleni.
Certainly, as it relates to food poisoning, the story that is going around that food poisoning, Spaza shops, etc. Unfortunately, that's not the case.
Yeah.
In terms of all our investigations in the city around the death that happened, we found out that it's organophosphate. In one instance, in Vosloorus, the family prepared and consumed sandwiches, and there were 2 children that died of that after consuming that. And over and above the sandwiches, they also consumed chips, which are Simba chips, and we tested both. And the positive traces of organophosphate was found in the home-prepared sandwich. And as relates to the chips that were bought elsewhere, those were found to be negative in terms of any trace of food poisoning. So the problem that we're picking up is mainly from organophosphate, the aldicarb, commonly known as aldicarb, and in all the instances, like in Tsakani, there was also an incident where we had to test biscuits, and they also were found to be negative. But tracing this matter further, we found out that there were fruit and vegetables that were stored by a neighbor who's selling this. And where he's storing this, he's also using this aldicarb, and the contamination should have happened due to that. And that's why we had this case of aldicarb.
Right? Remember, I'm linking all of these things so that you can go and read these articles and see these statements yourself. Right. So just to briefly cover this so that we are holistic. What is organophosphate poisoning? Organophosphate poisoning is when your body reacts to organophosphate exposure. Organophosphates are a group of chemical compounds found in the following: pesticides for pest control, insecticides which kill insects, herbicides which destroy weeds and vegetation. And a 4th thing, which really worries me and I hope has got nothing to do with what has been happening: chemical warfare, nerve agents. These are chemicals that affect your nervous system. Organophosphates harm your body. They damage your nerves and affect how your organs function. Short or long-term overexposure leads to respiratory failure and life-threatening outcomes. What types of organophosphates cause poisoning? The most common organophosphates that lead to poisoning include chlorpyrifos, known as suspend, diazinon, phenthenon, melathinon, and parathion. These are the most common that cause poisoning. In chemical warfare, the organophosphate sarin is most commonly used. Sarin, which is known as GB to the military, is a human-made chemical warfare nerve agent. It is one of the most toxic and fast-acting nerve agents. Nerve agents stop certain enzymes from working, and when this enzyme does not work correctly, muscles are constantly being used. As a result, people become tired and are no longer able to keep breathing. Sarin is a clear, colorless, tasteless liquid with no smell, and sarin can evaporate into a gas and spread into the environment. So this is one of the organophosphates that you also need to be aware of. I'm hoping that there's no such activity, that this is not as a result of people being in possession of such a dangerous substance and then releasing it into communities for ulterior purposes. I'm hoping it's not that. How common is organophosphate poisoning? A 2020 US study found that there were 2,079 cases of organophosphate exposure without any reported deaths, which was a significant decline from the peak exposure in the US in 1997, where there were 20,135 cases reported that year. The decline is due to increased awareness of the dangers of these chemical compounds in the US. Are organophosphates available in the United States of America? From 2000 to 2005, the US Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, phased out the use of residential organophosphates. Some organophosphates are still in use as insecticides for food crops. In the UK and in the EU, these products have been banned, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more now. So I've tried to cover and give you a factual matrix for everything so that we can have a conversation and think about this question that I'm going to put to you now. When you are making laws or policy, you are often trying to solve a problem with that particular policy. So for instance, if you see that people are speeding on the highway, then you put a speed limit, right? Or if you see that a particular road maybe has got dangerous curves, then you put speed humps to slow people down as they go on those particular roads. If you see that, pedestrians are struggling to get across particular roads and maybe are putting themselves at risk, you may even put traffic lights at a particular road or intersection to allow people to cross safely. And all of that is to make sure that you link your problem with your solution through the policy. When you fail to do that, you have what is often referred to as a problem-solution gap. So once you clearly identify the problem, your policy intervention has to work towards solving that particular problem effectively with the minimum number of steps in between. So here are my thoughts, first and foremost, about this substance, terbiphos, and also organophosphates. The EU has banned terbiphos. From the year 2000 to 2005, we just discussed how the US in and of itself has also reduced and phased out the use of residential organophosphates. The question then becomes, shouldn't organophosphates also be banned in South Africa? Organophosphate poisoning is not common in the developed world because they've banned these substances. Most cases of terbiphos poisoning are actually happening in the developing world. These cases of poisoning are happening in the developing world because there are very few protections against these types of pesticides. And these compounds, such as terbiphos, are widespread and they're uncontrolled and they are readily available for use by farmers and, as you can see, by members of communities. So is it not worth thinking about a blanket ban on these substances? They are so readily available, but they're supposed to be illegal. But shouldn't they just be banned altogether, even from agriculture? So that's something that I think we should all consider. The second thing I want to say is that there's another issue here that we're not talking about enough. Demand for terbiphos in the townships is caused by serious rodent problems in some communities, where people feel like they don't have a choice and they need something effective. And also, it's caused by a demand and a desire to kill cockroaches. People do their best to keep their yards clean, their homes clean and hygienic. The problem that happens in the townships is that the refuse collection and the general waste management and removal is causing a problem of rats and cockroaches. The municipal solid waste management is a major environmental problem in growing city townships of South Africa. Improper management of this waste causes hazards to inhabitants. Various studies reveal that about 90% of municipal solid waste is disposed of in open dumps and landfills. Township communities lack access to basic services such as sewage and refuse removal and running water, all of which are problems which then exacerbate the pest problem, the rat problem, and they happen more and more as townships